All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at the absolute bloody climax of the Roman Republic. We're talking about Julius Caesar's unstoppable rise to power, how he demolished ancient political norms, and of course, his incredibly dramatic assassination. This is a story of ambition, conspiracy, and, just how fragile democratic institutions can really be.
To set the scene, just look at this deeply chilling quote. It was delivered on the very morning of March 15th, 44 BC, by a seer named Spurinna. But why exactly did a seer deliver such a haunting warning to literally the most powerful man in the world? And why was the Roman Republic teetering right on the edge of the abyss that morning? Well, to figure that out, we've got to rewind and look at the very foundation of Roman power.
Section 1. The Office of Dictator, Demystifying a Roman Crisis Tool.
So, to understand the fall of the Republic, we have to establish a baseline here. Originally, the word dictator did not mean tyrant, not at all. It was actually a highly respected short-term crisis management tool. Think of a dictator as an extraordinary magistrate given the full, undivided authority of the state. They were brought in to fix one very specific, terrifying problem, like putting down a violent rebellion or winning a desperate war. The entire point was to crush the immediate threat and then get Rome back to normal. In fact, customary law strictly required the dictator to give up all those sweeping powers the second the job was done.
So, the traditional dictator was short-term, focused on a specific crisis, and most importantly, accountable. They could literally be prosecuted after stepping down. Caesar, on the other hand, he completely mutated this office. After he crossed the Rubicon and won his civil war against Pompey, he took this temporary protective role and transformed it into a perpetual, unlimited, and totally unaccountable grip on the state. He didn't just bend the rules here, he effectively rewrote the entire foundation of Roman governance just to suit his own ambition.
Section 2. Dictator for Life, The Breaking of Norms. So how exactly did Caesar shatter those ancient norms? Well, in early 44 BC, he took things further than anyone ever had. He was officially proclaimed Dictator Perpetuo, Dictator for Life. By taking a lifetime appointment, he was basically telling everyone he had absolutely zero intention of restoring a free republic. And to the Roman elite, a republic simply couldn't be free as long as Caesar was holding on to this kind of kingly perpetual power. And the thing is, Caesar didn't just hold power. He actively rubbed the Senate's noses in it. Look at this list. He replaced open elections with his own personal appointments, completely cutting the people out. He put his own face on Roman coins. That was a first for a living Roman, a huge symbol of divine monarchy, and people absolutely hated it. He literally sat on a golden chair in the Senate. When the public protested for debt relief, he used lethal force. And when 2 tribunes tried to stop people from calling him a king, he just deposed them and kicked them out of the Senate. He was treating his peers like subjects, plain and simple.
Section 3. The Conspiracy Forms, The Brewing Storm.
With the Republic feeling completely crushed under this perpetual dictator, a really dangerous plot started brewing in the shadows. We're talking about as many as 60 senators involved in this massive conspiracy. They were led by guys like Cassius and Marcus Junius Brutus, who, by the way, claimed descent from the very guy who drove the ancient kings out of Rome centuries earlier. These men truly believed they were restoring liberty. To them, the only way to save the Republic was preventive tyrannicide. So they set the date, March 15th, just 3 days before Caesar was supposed to leave Rome for a massive military campaign. The ancient sources tell us that this thick, almost cinematic dread hung over Rome right before the attack. The historian Plutarch notes that on the night before the assassination, all the doors and windows in Caesar's bedroom suddenly just flew open. Caesar woke up to find his wife, Calpurnia, fast asleep, but groaning and having this terrifying prophetic nightmare. She dreamt that she was holding her murdered husband in her arms, just weeping over him.
But despite all the warnings, Caesar actually refused a bodyguard. On his way to the Senate that fateful morning, he ran into Spurinna, the very seer who had warned him. Caesar, dripping with arrogance, mockingly reminded him that the cursed day had arrived without incident. He said, well, the Ides of March are come. And Spurinna delivered that famously ominous reply. They are come, but they are not gone.
It all built up to this incredibly eerie, supernatural atmosphere. Historians recorded some truly bizarre omens plaguing the city. During a sacrifice, an animal was found to be entirely missing its heart. That caused massive panic because, well, an animal without a heart defies nature. Witnesses also claimed to see multitudes of men
all on fire, rushing around, and a slave's hand that burst into flames but wasn't burned at all when the fire stopped. Whether you buy into omens or not, the psychological tension in Rome was absolutely at a breaking point.
Section 4. The Ides of March, the climax at the Curia of Pompey.
All right, let's get right into the violent climax. This was not some random mob attack. It was meticulously choreographed. First, Mark Antony, who was a strong, loyal friend of Caesar's, is purposely stalled outside in a long conversation so he can't interfere. Inside, Caesar sits in his golden chair and the senators crowd around him, pretending to support a petition. When Caesar waves them off, a senator named Cimber grabs Caesar's toga with both hands and yanks it down from his neck. That was the signal. Casca strikes the very first blow, stabbing Caesar in the neck. Caesar fights back, grabbing the knife, but then the whole mob descends. Hemmed in on all sides like a wild beast, he takes blows to the face and eyes. Finally, when he sees his trusted ally Brutus draw his dagger and strike him in the groin, Caesar simply pulls his toga over his head and gives up.
It was an absolute chaotic frenzy. The historical records tell us that Caesar suffered 23 stab wounds. It was so frantic that many of the conspirators actually slashed and wounded each other, just trying to get their daggers into him.
And that brings us to an unbelievable piece of historical irony. Stumbling from the blows, Caesar actually sank against the pedestal of a statue of Pompey. Caesar's blood completely drenched the stone. It literally looked as though Pompey himself, the very man Caesar had defeated in a brutal civil war to get all this power, was presiding over the vengeance, with his enemy now lying dead right at his feet.
Section 5. Aftermath and Abolition. The Irony of the Ides.
So, the deed was done, but the assassins' expectations wildly mismatched grim reality. They marched out of the Senate with their bloody daggers, calling the public to freedom, totally expecting to be cheered as heroes. Instead, it was crickets. And then, Caesar's will was opened. It turned out he had left a considerable chunk of money to every single Roman citizen. That, combined with Mark Antony's fiery funeral speech and the sight of Caesar's mangled body, caused the public to absolutely snap. The mob tore up forum benches to build a massive funeral pyre, then grabbed blazing branches and hunted down the murderers. In one tragically crazy mix-up, the mob bumped into a friend of Caesar's named Cinna. Just because he shared a name with one of the assassins, the crowd literally tore him to pieces in the street.
Rather than saving the Republic, the assassination just pulled the pin on its final collapse. Right after Caesar's death, Mark Antony passed a law permanently abolishing the office of dictator. Then came the brutal civil wars. By 42 BC, Brutus and Cassius were defeated at Philippi, where, crazy enough, Cassius actually killed himself with the exact same dagger he used on Caesar. Finally, by 27 BC, Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, consolidated all the power and became Rome's very first emperor, Augustus.
I want to leave you with a really provocative thought to ponder. The conspirators honestly believed they were doing the right thing by taking out a man who warped the Constitution for his own power. But they totally misread the Roman people, and they unleashed a cascade of violence that guaranteed the exact thing they were trying to prevent, rule by an emperor. So what do you think? Did Brutus and the conspirators commit a heroic act of liberation, or did their daggers deliver the final, fatal blow to Roman democracy? Think about that as you reflect on this explainer. Thanks so much for joining me today. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.